Hello and welcome back to the GB Fantasy Football channel. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a few midfielders across the game. Just a few I've selected in each price bracket, be ranging from 2 to 2.5 million, 3 to 3.5 million, 4 to 4.5 million, and 5 million plus. Now we're going to break down all the statistics behind these players and see which ones could possibly make it into our drafts. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to say thank you very much for the support on the channel. Once again, it's baffling me each video, each day, more views, more people coming to the channel, and I'm greatly appreciative of it. So if you could drop a like on today's video, be greatly appreciated, and hit the subscribe button for more content coming in the future. Now, without further ado, let's crack on with the video. So in yesterday's video, we did indeed cover the defenders of all price brackets and my favourites across the board currently. So if you missed that video, do go check it out. Some great content in there, some good insightful information on pretty much all the important assets that we're going to be looking out for our drafts. Now, as you can see on your screen currently, we have the 2 to 2.5 million pound range for midfield options. Now, I can't lie, picking the players in this bracket was quite difficult. However, there are a few standout candidates that I believe personally. First up, we've got Sean Longstaff, freshly transferred from Newcastle to Leeds United for about £12.5 million. As you can see, Leeds last season were exceptionally good in the Championship. 91.6 expected goals scored, 95 goals scored itself. Only 0.41 expected goals for Longstaff himself, and 0.21 expected assists as well. Now, once again, the expected goals scored and the expected goals throughout this video are going to differ. So expected goals scored and goals scored are from data at the club they will be at for the 25-26 season. So Longstaff's data will be Leeds, and the expected goals and expected assists are the player data from the previous season. So that will be from Longstaff season 24-25 with Newcastle United. Now, all these players, of course, don't just involve goal scoring and assist scoring. It's bonus points as well and tackles. And I can see Longstaff being a fantastic asset. Only 2 million in budget, and maybe he might have made it into my most recent draft. Now, do leave a comment down below if you'd like to see that in the coming days as well. We've got 09 of Sunderland, not fantastic attacking data last season at all. 59.3 expected goals scored, 58 goals scored themselves, but expected goals scored of 3.32. And from what I believe, he played at the back for some of the games as well. Sunderland was short. Perhaps some decent data going forward. Sunderland making some fantastic signings today, linked with Granit Xhaka. Also, they've got a dinger through the door. They're looking good. They've spent a lot of money, and I think Sunderland are going to give it a real go trying to stay up this season. We've then got Gomez from Wolves. Not great expected goals scored last season. It's 54 goals scored altogether. They outperform their data substantially, and I do believe that is the Cunha effect. Strand Larson, of course, chipped in with a few goals here and there. Decent data, 0.68 expected goals, 0.98 expected assists, so nothing too major on that front. Next up, a blast from the past, Jordan Henderson, of course, going back to Sunderland. 59.3 expected goals, 58 goals scored, similar to the 09 stats. 1.05 expected goals scored at Ajax last season, and 5.67 expected assists. Now, that is a really good statistic. If he can work with Saka in that Sunderland midfield, pick up a few bonus points here and there, he might actually be a really, really good asset. And then we've got Irabunen. Now, if you know him from last season, a tackle monster at the start. He played in the Carabao Cup fixture, picked up lots of points, tailed off towards the back end. But I can see David Moyes reintegrating him into that Everton squad. Not great expected goals scored last season. Not great goals scored, but they have been linked with quite a few decent players. I believe it's Cuba from Villarreal, and they've already got Barry through the door. I think Everton will be a better team going forward this season. Nothing too much to write about on the expected goals or expected assists, but he is a player to look out for. just bonus points wise, and altogether picking up between your 2 and your 5 points per game, ticking over nicely. Hovering the 3 to 3.5 million range is a lot easier than that 2 to 2.5 million range, where the assets are quite slim across the ground. Now, first up, we've got Alex Iwobi of Fulham, played in a deeper role, played out wide, played in the number 10 position. All these different positions offer a lot points wise. When he plays deeper, he gets bonus points more often, and he's definitely one to look out for. 58 expected goals scored and 54 goals scored means they didn't quite match up to that data that you'd hope for. 4.29 expected goals for Iwobi is a really good statistic, and 6.98 expected assists as well. So altogether over the season, he was expected at least 11 goal contributions. Now that is a fantastic return for a player who isn't too much on the budget. He's not going to take too much out of our needed funds for those premium assets. And I think he is the one to look out for. Fulham haven't been very active in the transfer market, but I can see going forward he'll be a decent one to look out for. We've then got Adingra. I believe he was in my first draft of the season for Sun Dream Team, and from 4 oranges across the board, you can see why he looks to be a really, really good asset. 59.3 expected goals scored and 58 goals scored for Sunderland last season. Nothing too major, but with attacking players brought in and new transfers, I can actually see them doing really well. 2.46 expected goals and 2.79 expected assists at his time at Brighton last season. It was a rotation player. I wouldn't look too much into that data. However, with the minutes that he did get, I think that it shows a high level of potential going into this season. We've then got Elliot Anderson of Nottingham Forest. Did fantastic for the England under-21s over the summer, and I do actually think he will break into the England main team for the World Cup next year. But 52.75 expected goals scored for Nottingham Forest and 58 goals scored. Now, as you can see, that is in red on the screen. They outperform the data massively, and Chris Wood will be a major contributing factor to that. Can I see him doing it again? I'm not sure. I don't think they can. But Elliot Anderson, if he gets the minutes, which he will no doubtably will, really good across the board for bonus points and tackles. 2.23 expected goals, but it's really the expected assists that he comes into his own of 4.13. So certainly a player to look out for, especially with their, I believe it's a Conference League or Europa League campaign, current Europa League campaign. So extra fixtures this season as well. Joao Gomez of Wolves, 45.37 expected goals scored, 54 goals scored, similar to the slide previously. The Cunha effect. Now he's gone. I'll be intrigued to see what the creativity levels are within the squad and how that affects them going forward. 2.87 expected goals, a pretty decent return from a midfielder, and only 1.2 expected assists. And finally, the last player in this price bracket is one I didn't really see before, and that is Carlos Alcaraz, I believe, of Everton. Now, 46.87 expected goals scored and 42 goals scored is not great. As I said in the last slide, I think Everton have been bringing players in a really good manner for them. And I think David Moyes knows what gaps need filling. That a brand new stadium, I think this can be a fresh start for them. 1.62 expected goals and 2.24 expected assists for a player who only played 15 matches, including 6 off the bench last season. He's one to look out for. He scored on the final day for Everton, and I think there'll be a lot that go for Iliman Ndiaye, and I think I might be one of them as well, depending on how the pre-season plays out. But Alcaraz is certainly one to potentially match up with a little bit of saving, of course. Once again, in these slides, you can see the green starting to appear more often as the price of each player goes up. Once again, Sun Dream Team have done really well this season at pricing players. Unfortunately for us, that is. I don't mind the odd player slipping through the net and making it a bit easier to build these teams. But this is the 4 to 4.5 million price range. And first up, we've got Ismail Assar of Crystal Palace. As you can see, 67.78 expected goals scored last season and only 51 goals scored. They massively underperformed data-wise. And if they do anything similar this season, creativity-wise that is, once again heavily relying on Eze staying at the club, I do feel like that front three of Mateta, Sarr and Eze can get even more points, especially with a European campaign on the horizon. 10.72 expected goals is an incredible stat, with 6.74 expected assists. You're looking at well over 17 goal contributions expected across the season. I think for his price, a lot will look at Eze. Fantastic asset last season, but I do feel like Sarr has gone under the radar. Next up, we've got Kevin Sade of Brentford. Now, as of today, Johan Visser, it looks like he's gone. Embremo has also left the building. Sade last season, towards the back end, really showed a lot of potential. Now, I'm not sure where he'll end up playing in that Brentford system, especially with a new manager. I think it's Keith Andrews. But he's showing what we really, really want in this game. 67.12 expected goals scored and 66 actually goals scored for Brentford. So they're pretty much on point for what the statistics are showing. But 8.2 expected goals for Sade is a really, really good return for someone who wasn't starting every fixture. 1.76 expected assists isn't too great, but it's certainly something he can build on. Next up, Elanga. 71.48 expected goals scored for Newcastle last season. That will be the Isak effect. Jacob Murphy, of course, chipped in. Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes. But I do feel like Elanga is going to come into his own, play on the right-hand side, and potentially add to that statistic this season. Only 68 goals scored. Slightly underperforming the data, but Newcastle, they're always doing well each season. 4.47 expected goals at Forest last season and 5.11 expected assists in a team, as we mentioned in that previous slide, didn't create too much. So Elanga really did stand out for them in the previous campaign. Gibbs White, 52.75 expected goals scored for Tottenham last season and 58 goals scored is lower than I thought, to be honest. But can they do it? Sorry, that is the Forest statistics. I'm really getting messed up with Gibbs White. They are the Forest statistics from last season. I thought he'd gone already. 52.75 expected goals and 58 goals scored is the Chris Wood effect from the last slide. That release clause has done me in there. Gibbs White. This is one where we are looking at his potential move to Tottenham. If he goes to Tottenham, I do feel like these stats from last season are just out of the window. 6.14 expected goals and 6.11 expected assists in a Forest team that was heavily underperforming, similar to Elanga, but he's even outperformed him. And of course, Gibbs White brings everything else. He brings the tackles, he brings the bonus points. If you take him and put him in that Forest team from last season, I don't think he's a fantastic asset. If you slip him into that Tottenham team under Thomas Frank, with Mohamed Kudus and Solanke and Tell on the left and whoever else they bring in, I do feel like Gibbs White will be an incredible asset, especially with European Champions League football on the horizon as well. And then we've got Pedro Neto of Chelsea. 73.12 expected goals scored for Chelsea last season and only 64 goals scored. Massively underperformed the data. Cole Palmer didn't really perform after January, but clearly they are creating chances, and that is what we are looking out for with these players. 3.5 expected goals and 4.77 expected assists. It's on the borderline. Now, the problem with Chelsea assets are, will they play week in, week out? I don't know. Noni Madueke has, of course, gone to Arsenal, so that's one player and one option away. But they've still got a plethora of options out wide. Will he play every game? Will he play those Champions League fixtures and then back it up with a Premier League game in a double? I'm not too sure. But Neto, if you're trying to make the saving on a certain Cole Palmer, is one to look out for. Finally, up today, we have the big hitters. We have everyone on this graph above 5 million plus. These are the players that we are all looking at, thinking, how many of them can we actually fit in our squad? Can we get the budget players in? And can we get these premium midfield assets through the door? Now, first up, Cole Palmer. 73.12 expected goals scored and 64 goals scored for Chelsea, underperforming the data, like I mentioned with Pedro Neto in the last slide. 17.27 expected goals for Palmer last season in a campaign where he flattered to deceive, and it wasn't a great one by any stretch of the imagination. He still pulled points out in games where he didn't return, and that is an incredible thing to have. 17.27 expected goals is a stat that should not be slept on when making these teams. Now, Chelsea's first few fixtures are really, really good compared to the other big six. They don't face any fellow title contenders, European contenders first up, and 9.14 expected assists. Now, I feel like there's a lot of people balancing out between Palmer and the next player on this list, which is Bukayo Saka. 73.57 expected goals scored for Arsenal and only 69 goals scored. That'll obviously be massively to do with the fact that we didn't have a centre forward from January onwards. Gabriel Jesus, Kai Havertz, both season-ending injuries pretty much, and Mikel Moreno, the box-to-box midfielder, the man who really did a solid job up front. But these statistics for Saka, of course, only half a season. He got injured away at Palace. His hamstring came away from the bone. 6.85 expected goals and 7.8 expected assists when he really played only 70% of the season at most. You can't look at that data and really deduce anything from it, other than if you take into consideration perhaps 10, 20, 30 more fixtures, probably 20 actually, thinking about it, his statistics would be out of this world. Now, if you're comparing them, I think Palmer edges it, especially being 0.5 cheaper than Saka as well, but there's a lot to think about when it comes to those two players. Next up is Florian Wirtz. Now, as you can see, 93.24 expected goals scored for Liverpool last campaign. Incredible numbers. And 86 goals scored was by far the most in the league, and it should not be slept on. 9.4 expected goals and 9.44 expected assists, so it's very balanced across the board. But of course, those statistics are from Bayer Leverkusen in the Bundesliga last season, so should be taken into consideration. They're not quite Premier League stats, but clearly he is a player that should be on our radar. We've then got Bruno Fernandes, 56.91 expected goal score for United last season. Poor showing. Only 44 goals scored in the entire campaign. 9.95 expected goals, really good. Of course, a penalty taker for Manchester United, we believe, this season. And 7.98 expected assists. But with no European football for Man United this season, potentially a League Cup second round game, but will he play in it? I'm not too sure. And if things are to be believed, he's actually going to be lining up in a deeper role in one of the two midfielder slots this season. Does that harm him? Does that make him better? I'm not too sure yet, but time will tell. And finally on this list is Eberechi Eze of currently Crystal Palace, but it's believed that Arsenal still hold heavy interest in him and have got to ship a few players out before progressing with negotiations on that front. If he is brought into Arsenal, I think for £5.5 million, he'd be in a lot of people's teams. 67.78 expected goals scored for Palace last season. Similar to Ismail Assar, 51 goals scored only. Data heavily outweighed in the expected goal score column. 16 lower. That is incredible stat. I would not have expected it in the slightest. 10.5 expected goals for Eze in a team that finished in the bottom half of the table. Yes, they did lift silverware. They did beat Man City in the FA Cup. But it is going to be a really, really good player. And then we've got expected assists of 4.68. Just a really, really good asset across the board. And that concludes the midfielder section for the just looking at the data between each price bracket and seeing how much value for money we can get out across the board. We can't fill all our teams with those premium assets, so somewhere along the line, we're going to have to look for the budget options. Now, tell me in the comments down below which player on this list has caught your eye the most and potentially caused you to switch a draft up or bring a new player in. There's definitely a few that have caught my eye whilst checking through the data across here. It showed me really how important players like Saka and Palmer are. Not that we didn't know that already, but those statistics really do stand out above most others. And it's certainly going to be one to look out for, especially with players like Haaland and Salah knocking about as well. we're going to have to find those budget assets across the board, and I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, a few transfers come in that help us out because, quite frankly, I am struggling draft wise. As I mentioned earlier in the video, there might be another draft video coming in the next few days, so do leave a comment down below if that's something that you'd like to see. Also, an attacker part of this 3-part statistic data series of sorts, seeing which players are potentially pushing their cause a little bit more than others. But that is it for today's video. Go check out the socials in the description below. We've got TikTok, X, Instagram, good stuff out there. And do leave a like if possible, if this video has taken your fancy, and drop a subscribe as well. It really does help the channel out. Pushing it out to everyone who would like to see this kind of content. There's a few lads out there who do it, but the more the merrier with the viewership and just growing the game in general. It's a fantastic game and it deserves all the players it can get. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in a new video very soon.